Good morning. The first item of business is a debate on motion number 2156 in the name of Stewart Stevenson on climate justice. Any members who wish to take part in the debate should press the request to speak button now. I call on Stewart Stevenson to speak to and move the motion. Mr Stevenson, you have 14 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer, and let me start by moving the motion that stands in my name, and in addition welcome the amendments that have come from both the Labour Party and the Green Party, I believe. Unless the debate takes an unexpected turn, we should be able to support both these amendments. In December, I represented Scotland on the United Nations delegation to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Summit in Durban. This was the second year in which a Scottish minister had been part of the delegation to the UNFCCC. The First Minister and Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, sent a joint message to the UNFCCC calling for climate justice to be reflected in the outcome of the talks, which should witness a collective global raising of ambition on both climate change mitigation and climate justice. I'll come back to that main climate justice theme of today's debate in a minute or two, but I should first take the opportunity to update the Parliament on the outcome of the Durban conference. In July last year, the First Minister wrote to the Prime Minister supporting higher global ambition on tackling climate change, and in particular saying that it was essential that we work towards EU agreement to a second commitment period for the Kyoto Protocol as the first commitment period comes to an end in 2012. David Cameron expressed gratitude for the Scottish Minister's support and acknowledged that Scotland has a good example to share with European colleagues of low-carbon investments and policies creating jobs and growth. A second Kyoto commitment period should be an interim step towards a single legal binding agreement on all parties to deliver the necessary global action to tackle dangerous climate change. Clearly, we were delighted that at Durban the EU did indeed pledge a second commitment period for Kyoto and in return gained a timetable from the major emitter nations for a new global agreement on climate change to be negotiated by 2015 and ratified by 2020. This is a tremendous example of Scottish political support across the parties, contributing to influencing an outcome on a global environmental issue of the first importance. In addition, in the months prior to setting off for Durban and in support of UK influencing efforts, I met a wide range of European ministers from, amongst others, Germany, France, Spain, Denmark, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovenia, Slovakia, Latvia, Estonia, Malta and Hungary, to promote the evidence from Scotland on the jobs, investment, trade and growth potential of the low-carbon economy, to assist in moving thinking within the EU towards increasing the drive for green growth. In Durban itself, as part of the UK delegation, which included 2 UK Secretaries of State and a Minister of State, I took part in speaking engagements and meetings with the business sector, states and regions, governments, NGOs, MEPs to promote Scotland as a model of international best practice on climate change and our messages about the economic potential of low carbon. I might say that I'm very grateful to the support of Scottish NGOs and young people in Durban in promoting the positive messages about Scotland. Over the last 2 years, international recognition of Scotland as a country pursuing high ambition on climate change and the low-carbon economy has undoubtedly increased markedly. We're a presence on the international climate stage, and we were struck this year by how many countries were beginning to echo Scotland's messages, in particular the need to provide certainty and a framework for investment to drive low-carbon growth. Durban has been widely hailed as a success for EU climate diplomacy, a leadership position that's underpinned by progressive countries within the EU, like Scotland, setting a high ambition on climate change. Well over 120 countries formed a coalition behind the EU's roadmap, and this is key to securing the Durban Platform Agreement, which keeps the major emitter nations at the negotiating table and now has a timetable. Durban also reached agreement on the establishment of the Green Climate Fund. Overall, the result was far better than we expected. However, we do acknowledge that the concerns remain over the shortfall in pledges required to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. So, returning to the theme of today's debate of climate justice, we've heard this morning on the radio that Alan Miller and Mary Robinson are suggesting that this is the first ever parliamentary debate on a climate justice concept worldwide. So all of us here have a role in that particular first. So what is climate justice and why does it matter? The Mary Robinson Foundation for Climate Justice aims to secure global justice for the many victims of climate change who are usually forgotten, the poor, the disempowered and the marginalised across the world. And by the way, that does not exclude people in our own communities. It isn't simply an international issue. The Foundation gives the following definition, which I think captures the essence of the agenda. Climate justice links human rights and development to achieve a human-centred approach, safeguarding the rights of the most vulnerable and sharing the burdens and benefits of climate change and its resolution equitably and fairly. That is an approach to combating climate change which focuses on people and is informed by science and seeks to both protect the vulnerable by supporting developing countries to increase their resilience to the impacts of climate change and ensure they have access to the benefits that come from the developed world's transition to a low-carbon economy. So what is the global problem that climate justice agenda seeks to put right? Al Gore, speaking in Edinburgh in September last year, set out his belief that there is now clear evidence from events in Pakistan, China, South Korea and Colombia that climate change is directly responsible for extreme and devastating floods, storms and droughts. He said that nearly every climate scientist actively publishing on the subject now agrees that there is a causal link between carbon emissions and the increase in intense and extreme weather events seen across the globe. We're all familiar via television and the internet the effects of extreme weather events. These events are experienced in all too vivid reality and all too often by those in developing countries, albeit there are also examples in the developed world of the effects being severe, and I think in particular of the increased death rate there was among older people a couple of years ago in France when there was a very, very hot, unexpectedly hot summer. The Pakistan floods, for example, of 2010, 20 million people were affected. Several hundreds of thousands of homes were damaged or destroyed. 6 million people were left without access to clean water, and 3.5 million children were at risk of contracting deadly waterborne diseases. An increase in extreme weather events driven by climate change will further drive the current widespread climate injustice. Al Gore praised Scotland's leadership on climate change, and the First Minister received the South Australia International Climate Leadership Award. And it's important for us to capitalise on Scotland's enhanced international profile on climate change to make the case for those who are in the front line of climate impacts. First Minister joined Mary Robinson in championing climate justice, for example, in his speech to the Central Party School in Beijing in December, where he particularly highlighted the gender dimension to this issue, as it is women who suffer more than men when it comes to the effect of climate change in situations of poverty. It is women generally in the less developed world who go to forage increasing distances to find diminishing quantities of wood. It is women who go further to get water for their families, for their villages. So the impacts are differential, and it's important we take account of that. As I said in my introduction, the First Minister and Mary Robinson sent a joint message to the UNFCCC calling for climate justice to be reflected in the outcome of the Durban talks. The First Minister has also urged world leaders to make this year the year of climate justice. But our actions in Scotland go beyond simply championing a concept. For the last 2 years, we've been strengthening Scotland's support for developing countries on climate change. We have Scottish partnerships announced in Copenhagen and in Cancun, supporting developing countries on renewable and clean energy, through, for example, the American Development Bank and Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute. Our International Development Fund has supported Strathclyde University's work on community solar power in Malawi. To coincide with Durban, the Cabinet Secretary for Culture and External Affairs and I announced the next call for project proposals to the International Development Fund for renewable projects to a value of 1.3 million, covering the countries of Zambia, Rwanda and Tanzania. Most recently, the Cabinet Secretary for Culture and External Affairs announced a significant contribution to our efforts on climate justice, a £1.7 million programme of renewable energy activity, also in Malawi, one of the world's poorest countries, to help set it on the road to green growth. I'll say a little bit more about our support on climate mitigation, in particular through the Scottish Government's International Development Fund, which is already bringing Scotland's world-renowned knowledge and expertise in the area of renewable energy generation to the communities in vulnerable countries such as Malawi. In a fast-developing world, it would be easier for countries such as Malawi to adopt high-carbon solutions to their energy needs. But it is imperative that in aspiring to Western standards of living, that they benefit from our knowledge and go straight to cleaner, low-carbon energy, rather than duplicating our processes and causing further damage to the climate. It also, of course, will give them the opportunity to acquire skills that are leading edge, that may well, in time, surpass those in what we term the developed world. As mentioned, a great example of the work being done in promoting sustainable energy and providing access to reliable electricity in rural areas of Malawi is part of University of Strathclyde's Renewable Energy Acceleration Programme, which was awarded over £1.7 million in February by the Scottish Government. The programme has multiple benefits, including reducing poverty and tackling climate change, two of the key themes of climate justice. The project will enable disadvantaged communities to be empowered to address their own energy needs and develop their own renewable energy projects, providing access to more reliable electricity for rural towns and villages. We forget, in the comfort of the Western world, how little reliable electricity there is in the less developed world. By providing research, technology, collaboration, educational and training support and entrepreneurship, Strathclyde University will work with the people of Malawi to develop their renewable energy capabilities and climate change policies, putting Malawi on the path to green growth. In addition, the programme will provide support at an institutional level in Malawi to support the formation of policies, including government policies, for renewable and community energy projects. Our approach and expertise fits with both the European Commission's priorities as set out in Agenda for Change, as well as the work of the UN High-Level Group on Sustainable Energy for All. In addition to this increased support on climate mitigation, we have already recognised the need to enhance our support for climate adaptation. In our manifesto last year, we committed to establishing an international climate adaptation fund. Given the clear link between the need for adaptation in developing countries and climate justice, I can announce today that we're renaming that commitment as Scotland's Climate Justice Fund, and that we will launch this fund in the next few months. I said in December in this chamber, ahead of the Durban talks, that we believe that action is needed now to grasp the opportunities presented through higher ambition on emissions reduction, to drive and incentivise investment in new low-carbon markets and deliver our energy security, environmental and climate justice objectives. I hope that Parliament agrees that Scotland can make a meaningful contribution to championing and delivering for climate justice worldwide.
Minister needs to wind up.
Thank you.